So what I'd definitely ask you to do is put up your hand, not at the end, right in the middle, anytime. And Chris has actually got a mic there. He'll dash over and take your questions. So if you've got a question 10 seconds in, ask it. So let's keep this as open and dynamic as possible. So first off, just want to introduce everybody. So first off, Greg Ng is a data-driven marketer and content creator. He's the VP of Digital Engagement at PointSource, which is a digital transformation company in Raleigh. So welcome, Greg. Carly Marlowe is Director of Marketing and Visitor Services at the North Carolina Museum of Art. She previously held roles in PR, social media, and marketing at the NC State Fair, full-service ad agency, and indie label Yep Rock Records. Wow, that's great. Dan London is currently the VP of Revenue Marketing at Bandwidth, and before Bandwidth, Dan was the first marketing hire at ShareFile and Ansible. Both companies were acquired by large global companies, and Dan's been in the area for over 20 years and has worked with some of the best known brands in the area. And JT Moore is Strategy Director with Centerline Studios. As Strategy Director, it's his job to identify the often hidden business objectives driving their customers' needs. And in today's competitive world, he believes that it is the combined effort of all channels working together that has real impact. JT, I told you I stole that from your LinkedIn profile. I hope that worked well. You liked it? Yeah? Okay, great. So, first thing, what we're going to be talking about tonight is going to be covering a whole range of things. There's topics like, how to advance your career as a marketer, whether you're starting off or whether you're deep in the marketing world. So I want to explore some of those topics. Want to get some strategic insights as well. Understand some things about goals, how marketers can goal themselves, working with other teams in the organization. We can get down into tactics, we can stay up at strategy, we can go all over the place. So definitely feel free again to ask questions. So, I'd like to start off, Carly, first off, if I can ask you first question, how did you get your start in marketing? It's, there's certainly university programs for marketing, but is that what you did, or did you kind of work your way into it? Tell me.
No, it's not. Is this working? Can you hear me? Yeah, I went to NC State, actually, so right across the road, and I was in the communications school. Marketing was something in the business school. I did not go to business school. So when I graduated, I started off in straight public relations, so I wanted to either be a writer, a reporter, or work pretty much in the same capacity, just maybe internally on the PR side. But the year that I graduated from State is the year that companies really started using social media. I had a Twitter account for the NC State Fair before I ever had one personally. So I think that just sort of started blurring the lines right off, and PR became social media, which became just generally marketing. And I think in my career, I've just seen it all start to blur, and the department that I currently head up does all of the things, which I'm sure a lot of marketing folks feel like that. So my team is PR, social media, advertising, design, and marketing. So yeah, it started off as something that I would never have considered myself, but I think just the technology has pushed me there personally.
Mm. Anyone else going to come up through an alternative route into marketing, or?
I started, hi everyone, I started on the design side. So I went to art school, design school, Rhode Island School of Design, and got a graphic design degree. One of the things that I think is important to know is that the term marketing, we're all marketers, right? You don't need a marketing degree. It's really just about communicating, right? If you want someone else to know your message, the way that you want them to hear it, then you're a marketer. And so I started on the visual design side, but what I really enjoyed from that was creating advertising, and that's how I kind of eased my way into marketing.
GC?
I think for me, I was kind of always into marketing and advertising. So whereas most toddlers were singing kids songs or the music that's on the radio, I was singing along to jingles and commercials. So actually Seagram's wine cooler in the 80s when it was really big.
Yeah,
so,
sure, man.
my parents actually had me on a cassette tape singing Seagram wine cooler's slogan from the 80s. So I think I was always the person who was asking why, and I get paid to do that now. But whether it was a billboard, whether it was a commercial, whether it was why is something blue or red, it was always trying to understand that reason that it gets someone to take action, or why we resonate to the things that we resonate. And then I looked up to people like Greg who went in the design side, but I had the opportunity to go to art school and decided instead I couldn't be a starving artist, and we went to business school. So I did go to business school across the street twice. It's kind of been, I'm one of the few cases I think where marketing's always been in my blood, and it's just what I've always done.
Great. Dan?
Yeah, I had is this on? Okay, I don't know why we always have to check this, but I kind of had a weird path. I went to college up in Western PA for a little while, basically thinking I was going to play pro hockey. Then I looked in the mirror and said, geez, I'm 150, 5'10", an American, and can't fight. I don't think this is going to pan out. So I came down here and got an English degree, and with that, it's still like, all right, what the hell do I do with an English degree? And just kind of naturally went into marketing. But, I'm old, as you can tell by the gray hair. And so by the time I graduated from UNC, it was right when the dot-com implosion was happening. So I was in a couple marketing firms, ended up getting laid off just from downsizing the air on chairs and the marble floors we had for the business. But went into teaching and realized I like to eat, I like to pay my rent, and so I got back out of teaching and came into marketing. But I think just kind of who I am, it made sense, and I was just drawn to that. And I think with that background and where I've come now, it was the right choice.
That's great. And so maybe kind of flipping it around, Greg, when you're thinking about like hiring someone for a marketing role, because it sounds like people come from pretty diverse backgrounds, they may not say at the bottom of their resume, education equals Bachelor of Commerce in Marketing. So what are you looking for when you're looking to hire someone for an entry-level marketing role, let's say communications, or you pick the marketing role?
Yeah, I don't look at resumes, and I don't look at portfolios anymore. Actually, even when I was hiring designers, I don't look at portfolios anymore. To me, it is all about how you talk about your work, and what interests you and what you're curious about. I'm really dating myself. I'm probably just as old as Dan. But when I first started interviewing for marketers, I would ask them to show me their keys. And the reason why I would ask them to show them my keys is, do you guys remember, you might still have them, I'm not going to call you guys out, but do you guys remember when like every single store had some sort of loyalty program that gave you a key thing, right? I would ask people, why is that one on your key ring, and what do you like about that program? And if they could explain why, and if they weren't just like, I don't know, they gave it to me and I got an instant discount, but they were like, well, I really like this because every third, or a good example, I worked on the DSW. Anyone like shoes? So DSW had a thing called Reward Your Style. In fact, I think they might still have it. I actually was part of the team that created that. And people would come and they would say, hey, well, for every $200 I spend, I get a $25 coupon. If you can talk about that as a consumer, then you can think about that as a marketer. So that's how I just like having conversations with people and seeing like what gets them like interested in marketing as a consumer.
Is that like just like curiosity? Is that what you're looking for? Like engagement? Yeah.
Well, curiosity, but also explaining it, right? I mean, it's you talked about wonder, right? I mean, understanding like why something just really neat, or something you hate, or something that you love, or something you're willing to tell someone about. We're consumers of brands, whether we're in the industry or not. And if you can actually learn how to talk about it, then you can be a great marketer.
Great. So JT, when you're looking at someone that's just coming on board, what matters to you? What's a good signal?
For me, it's more about what you've done. So, and I don't mean that necessarily like as what the line item or the bullet says on the resume, as much as what you've done outside of work. So like to Greg's point, a lot for people who have made websites, because especially for entry level, I always tell recent grads, like make a website, because that experience alone of learning how to code, learning how to make graphics, and how those pieces work together, and creating an experience, I think that's the tangible aspect that I'm looking for. Because if you've done it with your hands, I think you get a better grasp of how you can actually bring them to life for other things, and that gives you more power to talk, whether it's to create a landing page or to create creative that's going to drive to that landing page. You understand the implications of the things that you do from a first-hand experience.
Okay. Yeah, and Dan, I'm just thinking about the summary that you sent me, like the little bio, and the thing that jumps out is multiple acquisitions, early marketer in there, being able to drive that value. I mean, that's the thing that's like the key takeaway for me is, wow. I mean, if you're looking to build a company, get large, get acquired, have a great exit, then I'm going to talk to you. If you just wanted like one line on someone for a marketing role, let's say in a marketing communications role, is there anything that you would like? What is there like the summary line on the top of their resume, or the summary line in when they come and have a conversation with you? Anything like that would jump out?
Definitely working outside of the box that they think they're in. I think for me, and I've gotten to where I am just because I'll take on anything, and come at it from a really approach where you're like, here's the goal, here's the start, how am I going to get there, and the data-driven approach. And I think working at ShareFile really solidified that, because I've never worked anywhere where everything was data-driven. So I think if you get someone who can, I'll take on anything, I'll figure it out, but layer on the things that they've learned onto that and kind of show that it's great. And I've hired entry-level people, and probably the best one I did was I was coaching UNC's roller hockey team, and the kid had a history degree, but he was captain of the team. He had to manage all the funds, all the travel, manage me, the coach, and he did a great job. And it's just, you see that, like, okay, he can do that. I think he can come in and do paid search, and I taught him that. Now he's managing it for Citrix. So, I think when I look at these people with entry level, it's like, what have they done? And even if they've done service jobs, like, hey, if you're waiting tables and you're feeding yourself that way, it means a lot to me. So I know a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not going to put that on my resume, I'm not going to show that, but I think it's super important. I did it, and I talk about it all the time.
Right. Yeah, I remember hearing Jesse at ShareFile say, when he was looking to hire inside salespeople, that they didn't need to have a sales background. He would say, I'm looking for people that were bartenders or hairdressers or waiters, people that had the skill set. They didn't need to have that domain expertise. They just need to have, that larger skill set.
Yeah, and in the interview too, it's like people come in and kind of are passive. If they're being active and really selling themselves, that matters. And not just agreeing to everything I say. I mean, if I say, yeah, we like to kick kittens here, and they go, oh yeah, that's great, I love that too. I don't want to see that. I want to see that they're really selling themselves.
Or you better have a website like ikickkittens.com.
Yeah.
To back them up, right?
I think that's a .edu. But
Hey, Chris, we're going to have to cancel the after event activity, I'm afraid.
I got the warp chair.
Question for you here.
Hey guys, Greg, coming from the visual communications space, which is where I'm at, and I'm in the midst of trying to pivot into the marketing space like you've done, where was that entry point in your view that got you from creative services into a place in marketing where you could grow and be challenged and learn and make an impact immediately?
Sure. So that's a great question. I started by doing my own stuff. So, I was working as a designer and then an art director and then eventually a creative director. Well, when you're working with clients, you're dealing with, what are you dealing with? Their marketing campaigns, right? And it starts with curiosity, understanding. In this case, I was at a big ad agency, so I had the luxury of many different departments, brand planners, analysts, right, developers, media planners, to learn their business. But what really got me into it was just all the stuff I was doing on the side, right? I hesitate to use the word hustle because it's, I'm done with that word. But you really can make your own kind of, you can make your own presence felt by doing stuff that's not just what your boss is telling you to do 9 to 5, but going home and creating something cool. And then talking to people about it and marketing it yourself, right? And so the big transition for me, and I was very fortunate in that I worked at a company that was small enough and I was opportunistic enough where I could do both. So I got hired to do creative. I expanded that to also do marketing, right? So in that case, there is a benefit of working at a smaller company. But the way that I was able to sell that was just to come up with cool ideas and to show the stuff that I've done outside of work and say, hey, let me try this for the organization. And then that just leads into more and more stuff. So.
Can I follow up quick? So did you target smaller companies that would be more likely to allow you into the marketing space, or did you like corporate marketing teams or the marketing agencies? I mean, where did you find
Yeah.
your penetration points?
Yeah, the question was, did I target those in particular? No, I just got lucky, to be honest. But I do know a lot of people who are in bigger companies who want to do marketing. Look, you have a decision to make. You can take a pay cut and go somewhere smaller and just make it, or you can go to a bigger company and be lower on the rung, or you can just do your own stuff and be awesome at it. You know what I mean? Like, do your own campaign. It is so easy these days to run your own Facebook campaign. I ran a Facebook campaign for my web show, and I targeted 83 people, and then I eventually targeted 7 people, right? Why? Because I could, and it made sense, right? You could do LinkedIn campaigns. You could do all of that stuff. Now when someone says, well, what have you done? You could say, guess what? I'm an awesome visual designer, and I also know how to run SEO campaigns. I know how to run LinkedIn campaigns. I know how to run Facebook or Twitter campaigns, right? I know how to do any of those types of things. So it really is, you gotta do the time and find something you're passionate about and use that as a way to make mistakes.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think it's important to just, like, again, kind of coming back to making things, but document why you made the decisions that you made. So if you made a specific visual choice, explain that in marketing context, and put that in a site, like have a portfolio that shows, like, I do this, but I also do marketing. Because I think the future, and I don't know about the rest of the group, is the merging of those two disciplines. So I think designers are going to have to speak as marketers, and marketers are going to have to speak as designers. And that's why I encourage marketers to make websites, because it shows you can blend in that territory so you can talk to those people. But I think you're just going the opposite direction, which I think is equally powerful.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think that even in large companies where it seems like things are so structured and people have certain jobs, well, there's such an opportunity to still expand out, because people don't always know what their boundaries are, and you can always be pushing out and trying to get more. And in smaller companies, Greg, I think it's a great point about when you think of like a CEO, they don't know what they don't know, and they're always concerned about their what may be coming over the horizon. And to see that there's someone that's interested, that's curious, that's willing to look at new opportunities, new ideas, that's going to give them comfort that I'm not going to get ambushed by some change in the market or some new tool at a tactical level or something that I didn't fully appreciate.
I'll add on that I'm often looking for people who I'm hiring to come from completely different industries. I think in the experience that I've had, I've sort of had that opportunity, so I look for it in other people. So I work at an art museum. You would think that my whole staff has art history backgrounds, but at the end of the day, we're trying to bring in audiences who are sort of outside of the traditional art museum goer world. So us having that sort of filter where we're thinking, okay, we've got to learn about this so we can translate it, and it's just a nice way to do that. So I'm often looking for people who have experience in the music industry or in hospitality, or so I'm always interested when someone's resume comes across my desk and it really doesn't make sense why they're applying maybe to an art museum or to a record label, but it's just because they think it's cool and they want to apply the experience that they've had in something completely different. And the other big area that I'm paying a lot of attention to is just experience in project management, because especially in a nonprofit, in a museum space, we, again, have to do all of the things, and sometimes that's one of the more valuable pieces of the puzzle that someone can bring to our team.
So if you had like the opportunity to have someone that's domain expert and 7 out of 10 versus someone that's is absolutely not a domain expert in art, but is just a great communicator or whatever the skill is that you're looking for, how do you balance that out? Where would you come down?
Well, it sounds cliche, but I'm looking for storytellers, kind of like they've alluded to. And at the end of the day, if you can write, then we can figure everything else out. We can learn Facebook advertising, we can learn SEO, but if you can't write a compelling sentence that makes someone excited to come check out whatever we're doing, then I can't teach you that, or I don't have the time to teach you that. So I think that comes from my writing background and probably my sort of roots in PR. But a tweet versus a blog post versus a piece of collateral versus an advertising tagline, it kind of all starts there.
Okay, great.
Hi, This is for Greg. First, as a resume writer, I'd like to thank you for telling everybody that you don't read resumes.
Sorry.
But I was fortunate enough to be in a meetup a couple years ago when you talked about coming up with your 3 keywords, and I was wondering if you could touch on that.
Sure. It's a concept that I've called 3 brand words, which seems to get retweeted a lot, like years and years and years. My idea is this, is that you need to personally brand yourself. That's actually, I'm going to partially go back on my statement about resumes. And that is, you need to make an impact, right? If you can't market yourself, you can't market my brand. It's the reality. You know yourself more than anything else. You know what you want, how you want to be represented. So if you can't market that, where there is every barrier is gone, then you may want to consider a different line of work, because you know yourself more than anything else. The idea of 3 brand words is that if you come up with one brand word, meaning something that you're known for, like you're only known for one thing, it's too narrow. And if you have 4 things, it's way, way too broad. And so the idea is that you really want to be known for something. I'm going to call some people out, not specifically, but generally. If you have on your Twitter handle something like, I'm a father, and I'm also a Christian, and I'm also a such and such, whatever, like a plumber, okay? What you're telling me is that you're an expert at all 3 of those things. If it's on your Twitter handle, that's my point, right? Is that, and I'm a father, I'm a Christian, I can plunge toilets, but it doesn't mean that's what I want to be known for. What I want to be known for is the 3 things that you should broadcast to the world. So that's the concept of that.
I have an interesting question on that. So I'm a big believer, and I've always structured myself to be a generalist. So how does that work when you're limited in what you can say? Because I think it's, at least for me, I like to stretch into all those different places.
There's a great book I highly recommend. It's called The Neo-Generalist. Kate Smith, who was a speaker here 2 months ago, she works on my team, and she told me about this book. And the idea, though, is that a lot of people, all of us here on the panel, are great at a lot of different things. That's good and it's bad. You got to find the balance. The problem with being a generalist, I would contend, is that if you just list yourself as a marketer, that you should consider what is that adjective before that. Because we're all marketers, right? So what are you known for, right? There's some people out there that I know that are known for SEO, or known for email marketing, or known for social media. It's important I think, to choose one. It doesn't mean you're going to walk in and be really like, well, you clearly don't know the 99 other channels of marketing. It's more like, what is your area of expertise?
So Dan, when just coming to that point about the self-promotion, being able to build your brand. So when you look at your team and you've got team members that you want them to be successful in their careers. So where do you draw the line in terms of that self-promotion, where it's geez, let's worry about bandwidth a little bit more and a little bit less about your brand, or do you just let the chain go?
For me, I tell people, and I even interview them, like, I don't care if you're here 10 to 2. If you hit your numbers and we're looking good, that works for me. So if they're able to do that self-promotion and do all that on their own, it's good. I think there's a lot of people out there who you're like, wow, they're out there online a lot, but you don't know who the hell they work for. And I think Greg is somebody who's always online, but I always knew where he worked, but I always knew all the other 800 other things that he was doing at once too, So I think you have people, you need to, if they're going to do a lot of that, like, hey, you got to kind of take us along with you if we're going to give you that runway to do that. But it's really, a lot of it is, like, they were mentioning is, you're creating your own website, doing this and that, and it's that learning will help me. Like, I've had people working for me who have side projects, freelance. I'm like, works for me, because you're going to learn doing that I'm not going to have to pay for. You're going to learn some stuff. You're running paid search for somebody else. That's more time. You're going to get better at that. That's going to pay off for me.
Okay, great. Carly, you'd mentioned before that the importance of community outreach as far as in your work. Do you see then that maybe there's that aspect where the more that they can promote themselves, the more they're reaching out to the community, or is that
Yeah,
relevant?
I mean, it clearly depends on what your organization's sort of target audience is, but obviously we're mainly focused on the Triangle and the state of North Carolina. So I'm intentionally hiring people who have their hands in a lot of things. Because at the museum, we're thinking, okay, what are conversations that people of a certain target audience are already talking about, are already engaged in, and how can we become a part of that? So I think an example of something that JT is involved in would be Raleigh Murals Project. I had done some freelance writing where I interviewed one of the, what do you call him, his co-founder at Raleigh Murals Project for just an article about the cool public art scene in Raleigh. I came to work at the museum. I figured out, hey, this is something that people who we want to come to the museum care about and would be excited about. So that's how we sort of started that out and did something really cool around one of our exhibitions. So I just hired 2 positions, and I asked them, what else are you involved in? What do you care about? What do you feel like you could bring to the table as far as partnerships, contacts, relationships? And that really works for us because we're really focused on engaging the Triangle.
Great. I'm sorry, I didn't get your question earlier.
So there was a recent press release about Publicis buying, not going to Cannes, and then spending that on an AI engine. And I was just wondering how you feel AI or technology is going to affect jobs of the future in the marketing profession.
We won't be able to afford them, so it doesn't matter to us.
I think it's pretty brilliant. I've never been I've never been into awards. I know it's big business for holding companies and advertising, but by not spending money, they were able to get instant PR for their AI engine that they're building. That's brilliant. They could still go back and spend money next year, right? But the timing was right, the messaging was right. It instantly added credibility to a different brand that they were trying to push. We do a lot of work on AI and cognitive and chatbot and zero UI stuff like Alexa and Siri and Google Home at Point Source, and it's everything that we are doing. That understanding how that pertains to the way people interact with devices and understanding how that talks about how people will interact with brands is everything we are focusing on.
There we go. Just pause here for any other questions from the crowd. No, okay. So let's step back a little bit and talk a little bit about strategy and marketing strategy and how to set that. So when you're thinking about JT, when you're going into a client and you're helping them to identify a marketing strategy, where do you begin? What are the first questions you start asking them in order to start formulating that marketing strategy?
Yeah, I'm in an interesting position because I've lived the life of most of my clients from an agency perspective, having been previously in-house for so long. So I get a lot of times where they're coming from, what they're trying to do, and for me it always kind of comes back to what we talk about is finding the kind of the Venn diagram between the business objective and the user need. In the middle is where you actually find success, right? So the questions for me typically end up, there's the low-hanging fruit, which is where is this thing going to live that you want to make? Who is the target audience? But then there's also things like, what do you want them to take away from a feeling and emotion and a messaging perspective? What do you want them to do next? Which I think we often forget about. What is that call to action? I had the good fortune of working for someone as an internship in college, and it was always CTA, 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 so that's just ingrained in me. But I think that's where I typically start, is understanding that middle ground and the merging between business objective and customer need.
Okay. And Carly, how does your marketing strategy get set at the beginning of each cycle?
Yeah, we're in a really unique, I guess, situation in that at the museum we think a lot about different experiences that we can provide That may be a ticketed exhibition that's only around for a few months that really is a very specific audience that we do a lot of research on, and we think a lot about, well, what publications do they read? How can we target them on social media? What sort of campaigns will catch their attention based on just the other things that they're involved in around the community? Then we have a tagline that we're sort of internally working on is art, nature, and people, with the people and nature part probably being the more surprising of the three. We have a great 164-acre park that we are trying to utilize to sort of reimagine what someone thinks about a museum experience. It's not just art hanging on the walls. So as we've sort of organizationally wide come to this sort of new perspective, new model, so to speak, we're not just doing ticketed exhibitions. You can come see a Monet and have a 3-hour experience and maybe have a nice lunch. We're looking to be much more community-minded, so we want it to be a gathering space. We want to host more free events that have some earned income pieces to it, beverage, food trucks, that kind of thing. So all of these sort of new models of programming that we're trending toward has really sort of forced us to pause and rethink, okay, we're not just going to do an ad campaign about Picasso for the next 4 months. How do we talk about what we're trying to do sort of from a reinvention standpoint? Because I think, I used to work in the music industry, and I kind of consider museums to be in that position that the music industry was, like post-Napster, when everybody wasn't buying anything physical anymore, or streaming was coming into play, and I feel like that's where we sort of are in the museum piece right now, so we're trying to kind of play catch up there. So it's changed a lot where I am right now strategically.
Okay, it seems like so many of us have, in our companies, will have assets that we didn't even think about. So the park, or the fact that there's the bike trail that comes through there, so that you've got a stream of people coming through. So I mean, like how would you think about encouraging other companies that may have hidden assets that they didn't think about before that could be part of their approach or their marketing mix?
Yeah, I mentioned storytelling earlier. We tried to create a lot of content from our perspective, the behind the scenes component, and the sort of, you walk into a museum and you see art on a wall. Again, that's not all of the story. We have conservators who are using x-rays down in the basement to look at, what someone painted first. We have volunteers who have this whole different life, and they come to the museum and they give these great tours. So being able to create that content that tells those stories, and then setting up the channels and building them so that when you distribute it, there's conversation that's happening around it. Those are a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. Again, we're in the arts sort of nonprofit space. Sometimes you can be a few years behind everyone else. So our new big area of focus is video, which is, kind of behind the curve a little bit. But we're just trying to use our resources in a better way that people can rally around, because word of mouth is so big for us right now.
Okay, great. So Greg, I mean, in PointSource's tagline, transformation is right there. And so, thinking about this kind of transformation that Carly's discussing, where it's it's not just art, it's looking at it broader. How do you encourage the people you work with, the clients you work with, in order to do that?
It starts with defining a user journey. So it's very easy to just jump on the latest marketing tactic and say, yeah, check the box, I did a Alexa skill or something like that. But what you need to do is first identify, like in Carly's case, identify who are the types of people, persona generation, right? Who are the types of people that you want there, or to do what? And then you map out all the things, you clear your mind of the limitations of your budget or your time, or any red tape, and every client has more than we on the agency side hope that they would. But then once you clear your mind and identify what's the ideal journey, then you understand, well, what are the different channels and touch points to leverage that behavior, and then, only then, do you assign value to your personas doing each one of those steps, and then from there, you come up with your plan. So I echo what JT said about customer need and business outcome. Everyone, when you go to a client, they say, what do you want to do? I want to make more money. Well, duh, everyone wants to make more money. What does that really mean? Well, it means I want 20 new reps to sign up per month, or I need 500 new people to come in for the first time to the museum. Well, what does that look like? Instead of going, well, I should advertise at the NNO, or I should do a Facebook ad, or I should do a YouTube channel. So it really needs to start with the user. And I think that's a huge, huge changing dynamic in the industry, and certainly in how people want to be messaged by brands.
I'll tag on to that. My actual title was updated about 6 months ago. It was Director of Marketing, and we tied in Director of Marketing and Visitor Services. We're trying to take a much more visitor-centered approach, because at the end of the day, you know, the curator can talk as much as he wants to about a particular kind of art or a particular artist, but if the visitors in the area have no interest in that, then, you know, the product is kind of dead. So yeah, that's a good illustration of that.
And Greg mentioned Kate Smith, who did a thing on customer journey mapping a couple months ago, and I had the good fortune of working under her at Centerline for a little bit, and one of the things she taught me was an exercise that we call thinking, feeling, doing. And so what you actually do is you map out from discover, learn, and try and buy from a customer journey perspective. What is that user thinking, feeling, and doing at different stages? And I think what Greg was kind of getting to at is a business need. You use pronouns like I need, the business needs. But when you switch into that quick exercise of just thinking, feeling, doing, it forces you to take that customer mindset to understand what are they going through, what are they trying to accomplish, and then how do you marry those two together?
Great. Dan, you've got a subscription business, so I got to imagine that kind of guest services model applies equally at Bandwidth, where you're wanting to make sure that, you know, post-sale they're just as happy. Is that true?
Yeah, it was more so at a company like ShareFile. You know, here Bandwidth, you know, they're putting us into their telecom stack and started to kind of rip that out. Okay. But you know, we definitely put it in there. But really, from a marketing standpoint and where to come up with strategy, it was determining how you're going to measure it, you know, and applying that across the channels. And really, at ShareFile, before we were acquired, we had a small budget, and you know, so it's like, all right, where are we going to get the most return from that, and just keep piling into that. And same thing I did at Ansible. Like, all right, I have an even smaller budget there. Where am I going to get these people into the trials I need to do the paid product, especially with Ansible. It's an open source product, and we were trying to sell a piece on top. It was very tough, but it was just all about, all right, what's the measurement? What's going to get us to revenue? So at Bandwidth, I have a small budget again. Eventually, I'll get somewhere I have a really large budget when I start, but you know, usually comes after acquisition. But hey, you know, it's really setting up how are we going to judge this? How are we going to measure it? And then layering, just going, all right, this channel is working and it's driving that revenue. Let's keep piling onto it.
Okay, great. JT, do you want
I actually have a question for the group. I think one thing that inspires me about all three of you is your ability to kind of reinvent in industries and in jobs. So I'm kind of curious, like for the folks out there that are looking, like how did you go about switching from music to art to PR to, I'm looking at you, Carly.
Well, I don't remember when I thought this. It was probably when I had my first real 9-to-5 job. But I thought if I could, because back in school I did an internship like every single semester starting like sophomore year. And I was like, if I could do an internship for, you know, take a job on for 6 months at a time and then totally switch the next 6 months and do that for the rest of my life, I would love that. I think that's sort of my sort of journalism writing background. I love talking to people about these very different things and sort of imagining myself in that life and being able to, you know, switch it however many months later. So I remember saying that, and then now I think I guess I've kind of done that a little bit. But I just kind of look, especially from a PR perspective, I want to help connect people with stuff that they love, and so I've tried to put myself in industries where I can do that. People love music, people love deep fried food, people love art and sort of fun social experiences like we have at the museum. So I've just kind of chased whatever I thought was cool and then figured out how I could get in on that.
Let me throw a question out to you. Let me throw a question out to you guys, because part of what we do here is mentor young marketers. And y'all are four very accomplished in your own right. Did you have a mentor? What was that experience like for you, and do you do that now? Do you mentor back?
I love to talk about myself, so I'm just kidding. But no, I meet people for coffee and kind of, like I had such a different path than everybody else and kind of lucked into it and try to pass along things that I learned. And I think where I kind of came out of teaching and one thing I picked up out of that was be able to get up in front of a group and talk and kind of deal with conflict and things like that. And I think that helped me in a role that I went into after that at a search engine company. And I just kind of try to get everybody to think, don't stay in that box. I think I mentioned this before, but just branch out. And you don't have to go and get in Greg's face like, why are you doing that? What are you doing? But it's more like just asking questions and trying to understand how what he's doing impacts me. And, I got into, after I taught, I was doing organic copywriting. And they were just starting paid search. So I went over and like, how does that work? And then started writing paid search ads, and then ended up, next thing you know, somebody quit and they came to me and said, we want you to take over all these accounts, and started doing that. So I think when I'm mentoring young people and talk to them, it's like, expand out. I think if you're open to going to talk to people, just ask them to meet for coffee without an ask. I think you get a lot of like, I want this from you, I want this, and it's hard. But if they come out, I just want to understand what you're doing, it's great. And I keep those people in mind and go, all right, here's some openings, I can pass them along. But it's just such a kind of a unique area we are now compared to when I was coming up. There were no jobs, people were getting laid off and things like that. Now we're getting interns who have a choice of like 10 different internships and things like that. So, I think it's really important for people coming up to really take advantage of just this community and how tight it is. Everybody knows everybody. Like, it's the first time I've met you, but I followed you on Twitter since ever,
I'm going to go back and say, you just need to do awesome things. Just like be extraordinary. It's really, really hard to get anyone, it doesn't matter how senior someone is, to get anyone to do anything ever. But it's really easy to do really cool stuff that you are passionate about, and then it becomes really easy to tell other people about it, right? And it doesn't have to be in a framework of 3 brand words. It doesn't have to be in an actual website or anything traditional. It just needs to be extraordinary. So it's important to, again, market yourself. For me, I'll just say, the key to me is, do not tell me, can I meet you for lunch? There's only 5 lunches in a work week. And I think I could probably speak for all of you guys. That is that's the hardest gig to get, in my opinion, is a lunch. The easiest one is meet me for coffee early. I'm in the office at 7. Meet me at 7 somewhere, right? I'll probably even buy you your coffee. But meet me in a place that is near my office. You know what I mean? I literally have people sometimes saying hey, I'd like to take you out to lunch in Pittsburgh. And I work in North Raleigh, right? That's unless you are a prospective client, that is not happening. And I have nothing against people personally. It's just, you got to know your audience, and you got to get what you can get, right? And you will move mountains. There's people here in the audience I know that I've known for pushing almost 10 years, right, Phil Buckley? Almost 10 years, right? Phil and I have known each other, Brian McDonald, right? We've known each other for a long, long time. It wasn't, and it never started with, hey, let me take you out to lunch. It started with, I'm doing some cool stuff. It's good to see you again. Why don't we hang out? Or I saw you at this event. Now I'm seeing you at this event. And then it works its way, right? It's like dating, right? So that's the biggest issue that I would say everyone, this is not just marketing industry, everyone has these days as you're trying to close on a first date. And it's really, really important to just ease into it. You know what I mean? And just do cool stuff, because we will all take notice and share it. And don't tweet at me and say, please follow me back. You know what I mean? Because people do that, right? Just let's have a conversation. And guess what? I'll probably follow you back when we have a real conversation. So that's my advice.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it's about adding value, and I think what we talked about early in the session is that so much of the constraints we seem to have on ourselves about doing awesome things are just self-imposed. If you're in a large company, it's probably just because you don't know where the boundaries are, and you don't need to care where the boundaries are. You can just push beyond those. Or if you're in a small company, there's always 1,000 hats that are left unworn, and you can pick those up. Or Carly's point, where it's a museum, but it's about an experience, and it doesn't have to be about just the art. You can go beyond that. So not recognizing limitations. Well, not over respecting limitations.
Right.
But, yeah. Stop here again just for any questions, and anyone had any great mentoring experiences themselves they want to call out, or a favorite mentor you want to give some props to. That was an easy one for the TMC interns.
I'll do a selfish plug.
Yeah.
So a friend and I a few months ago actually started a small company called People Mentality, and the whole premise is that I don't think there is enough mentorship. I think there's a difference between people who are managers. There's a difference between people who are leaders, and there's a difference between people who are mentors. And so what we're trying to do is offer more mentoring to millennials, because I think we don't do enough to allow millennials to grow into leaders, let alone into mentors. So I think I highly agree with the fact that mentoring is incredibly important, but we just don't do enough to empower people to learn how you go from being a manager to a leader to a mentor. So we're trying to proactively kind of make that service available to people, to grow people from the bottom so they can kind of feed that back into the ecosystem.
Yeah, so true. My first position was an intern as well. That's how I got into marketing. And I remember the first thing I did was I went down, everyone had offices all along this, everyone had a window, and they all had exactly the same sized offices. And someone said, sit wherever you want. And there were a bunch of cubes over there. But then at the end of the hallway where everyone had their office, there was a storage room that had a window that was about 3 times as big as everyone else's. Just went in there, set up shop, and you don't need to respect the limitations. Even when you're an intern, you can just see how large you can expand into. Yeah.
Yeah. My first 6 months at Centerline, I sat at a booth. We have booths by the kitchen, and everyone goes there for coffee and breakfast in the morning. And I didn't ever work out of my desk for this first 6 months. I just sat by the kitchen, and eventually people incorporated me into conversations because I was available.
Right.
And I think that's another way to kind of break down some of those barriers. Is we rely on electronic communication too much. So just make yourself available and go talk to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, great.
Hi.
Hello.
I want to take.
Hi, everybody. So I can share a mentoring story for you. I've been in radio for 31 years, and the guy who taught me how to interpret ratings back in the bad old days when we were still doing big, giant books of paper with numbers in them, I later realized why he did it, because I'm now in a position where I'm teaching other people in the industry how to use ratings, how to interpret them, how to make your station look good with the numbers. And I'm realizing that you learn what you teach. And so that's what the value of being a mentor is, in that it's making me better at it, while I'm helping them be better at what they're doing too. So any experience there? Are you learning while you're teaching?
I think I certainly am. I work in an organization that senior leadership is, let's just say most people are a year or two away from retiring, and across the board. And I think 2 years ago, we did a strategic plan for the museum, a 5-year strategic plan, with just like everyone else in the world, a big component of that being how are we going to engage the next generation of museum goers, AKA millennials, digital natives. So I've been lucky enough to be part of an organization that is very strategically thought about that next generation. And I think part of sort of me moving into that position was one of those pieces, and they've made other hires in that regard. But I think part of that is me having to do a lot of teaching as I'm learning, and I've tried to build my own team in that sort of spirit, and it's been very much we're going to figure this out together, we're doing lots of new things, we're going to try a lot, we're going to hopefully fail a lot, because that means that we're trying, and just sort of being very aware that this is sort of a new way of doing things. And I've been fortunate to have senior leadership recognize that and be part of that. But I think that's a really good point. I'm going to use that.
Anyone else have a good experience on that learning as you teach?
I'll just echo how it's important. My resume literally says an organization where I can learn as much as I can teach. So I'm with you. I think that's important. I think as we create flatter and flatter organizations, it's important to be able to transfer that skill. So the only way to move up in our industry or any industry is to teach other people how to do the job that you're doing so you can do something else and add more value. So I think it goes without saying that that's the most important thing to do is to share. And it really challenges you to explain it in a way that someone else can actually understand and act on.
Yeah, I think it's also important to talk about teaching the concept, not the tactic. The marketing has changed so much even in the last 18 months, right? So it's important to know the concepts. The other thing that is a great kind of exercise is try to teach your kids what you do. A, it's very humbling. B, they will teach you a lot more than you think. I have a 14-year-old who taught me something about Snapchat that I used for a client, right? You generate opportunities and generate ideas everywhere. And it only started because I realized, man, if I can't explain to a client where my value is, if I can't explain it to my kids, then I can't explain it to a client, right? So I was starting to work on my, what's my pitch and how am I showing value? And your kids are gonna give you the raw truth. So it's very important.
That's great. Yeah, one thing I'm hearing, when you spoke about the tactic there, of the Snapchat, seems a common thread that I'm hearing across a lot of your responses is how that there's skills that sort of traverse time, like communication, that was one, or curiosity, that was another, or just the hustle. Those aren't tactics. Those aren't things that Friendster. I'm terrific at Friendster, or whatever, and that disappear overnight. And so, is that something that can be taught? Is that something that you can mentor people in? I mean, can you, or is it?
Curiosity for those is what can be taught. In this day and age, your phone, who has an iPhone here? Okay, Android? Okay, about 50-50. You should be downloading everything. Try it out. See, make mistakes, right? 10 years ago, it was, man, there's a new network. I better claim my name, right? Doesn't matter anymore. But has anyone been on WhatsApp? Anyone use WhatsApp? Okay. Does anyone have an Amazon Alexa and Echo? Right. It's important to try everything and know everything. It's not important to be an expert at everything, but you got to have that experience. One of the things we were talking about is I hear people talking about Uber being a huge disruptor, and then I say, what do you think about it? Well, I've never used Uber. Look, we all read Business Insider, which is trash, by the way, and we hear that it's a disruptor, and then we just add it to our speech, right? You got to try that. You need to understand why Uber is different than Lyft, right? I'm not talking politics. I'm talking about just how do you use the app, right? You need to understand the difference between Siri and Google Home and Alexa, right? You need to understand the difference between an Apple TV and a Roku, right? Devices. What's the difference between a Samsung watch and an Apple Watch, right? Try it. Get your hands on it. Learn, because that mentality is what's going to keep you poised for being a marketer for a long, long time. But if we are all stagnant, I can't remember who I was talking to before we started, but I got my start in direct mail. Still viable, by the way, but it was direct mail because there was no email, right? Because there was no cell phones, right? Because we had a call center. And we had a business reply card that we had to wait 6 weeks to get responses from, right? But if we stayed just doing that and not understanding all the other things that people are exposed to, your career will die. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is, right? So the constant is understanding that it's always moving. And how do you approach the new things in the market? And the way to do that is to be curious and to actually just do it. When something new comes out and it's an app, especially if it's free, you have no excuse. Download it, learn it, understand it, and then delete it. You know, but if you don't, then you can't talk about it. And if you can't talk about it, you can't evolve with the market.
Okay, I'm curious if there's any more questions that I can answer or we can take for the panel. Okay, so let me come back to something, Dan, you were saying earlier about measurement and the importance of measurement. I think one of the things that often we struggle with in marketing is credit. You know, getting credit for some of the work we do, like things that may be less tangible, maybe brand, maybe others, versus, you know, demand gen, where, you know, there's a funnel and there's a flow. So, you know, when you're interfacing with VP sales or, you know, the CFO, how are you communicating, look, we're getting value here? Is it just pipeline, or what else are you doing to showcase marketing's impact?
At the end of the day, it's revenue. You know, where I am now, and kind of tying to that, it's funny you brought in VP of sales. You know, years ago, I'd be like, I'm not going anywhere near sales. You know, I'm marketing, I'm bringing the leads, you know, send them over to sales, and these are great leads, and they suck at them.
Yeah.
Where I am now, and I manage an inside sales team. I manage a team of lead development reps who are working not only the stuff that they're going out and finding, but stuff that I'm bringing in. And, you know, everything we look at is it driving to them, driving revenue? And, you know, the brand plays into that, the marketing channels play into that, but at the end of the day, we're looking at, all right, how many qualified leads are we passing over to sales? How many of those are converting? How many of those are becoming closed won? And looking at that revenue number. And we have a thing each week that we put out. It goes to the COO, and the people above me are in there, and they're looking at, it's like 10 numbers. It's a real small thing, and we look at that. I mean, we're not looking at, all right, how many tweets did we get? How many likes did we get? Because that shit doesn't keep the lights on.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, if you're not driving revenue, getting your company on Instagram doesn't mean anything. So everything I've always tied into is just like, is it driving revenue? And I think it ties into company-wide. It's just like, I think a lot of people don't understand, if you're not driving revenue, you need to get out of the way and help us drive it. You know, every day somebody who's driving that revenue walks in the door, there should be a line of people there giving them high fives and holding signs up. Like, come on in, you're keeping the lights on. We're staying in business because of you.
Yeah. And JT, when you're thinking about clients themselves and you're dealing with, you know, so are you one step away from being able to communicate what the value is because you're, you know, they're clients. You're not necessarily in the company. I mean, how do you make sure that they know that you as an agent for them are delivering value?
That one's tough. I mean, I think it is really kind of, it comes back to empathy and understanding your user. And in this case, for me, in an agency side, my user is my client. So I'm dealing with them and their user. So like it's understanding both of that. I mean, I think kind of where we're going with some of that previous answer is, I think it's communication and language as well. Is speaking the language of the people that you're talking to. So if it is the CFO, you're talking revenue. If it is the social person, I need to be talking things like share and retweets and things like that. It's speaking their language and understanding who your audience is, whether that is when you're doing marketing or whether you're marketing internally. Because I think we forget about that a lot. We focus so much on the end customer and not so much of how we break down those walls internally. That was the biggest kind of culture change for me when I went to an agency side, was understanding my role and that ability to market internally and kind of rally people around ideas, whether they're my own or whether they're others.
And Carly, do you have multiple targets that you're focusing on, like, you know, so number of members, new members, or, you know, what the endowment looks like, or how do you measure your success?
Well, I'll echo what JT just said, in that when I started in this role, I recognized that internal communication was something that we really needed to focus on. We started something that we put out every 2 months, and we circulate not only to admin staff, but we also have a really big volunteer population, docent population, and frontline staff that's sort of outside of the normal, marketing development, accounting departments. We call it the museum message, and it's literally the 3 things that we should all be talking to everyone about for that time period. So just little things like that. I think that was a really important piece that I felt like information sharing. We didn't want anyone to, the first time they learned about that new app that we just launched, just because they read about it in the N&O, because they're covering it from a press release. We want people to have that information. Speaking to sort of all the different metrics that marketing is supposed to support, I think one thing that I've learned a lot is that everyone thinks they know what marketing is, and then part of my job is to translate exactly what they're asking me for. A lot of the times at the end of the day, they mean advertising dollars, which I don't always have. And so trying to figure out, you're asking me for this, I think you mean this, and this is how we can help you accomplish it. Because we're working with the museum store to support their sales. We're making sure that Iris Restaurant has people in the seats for Sunday brunch, and then really big picture, we're making sure that we have a healthy membership base and that we are selling tickets to an exhibition that we paid a set amount of money for and we've got to cover on ticket revenue. It's really kind of figuring out what someone's asking for, how I can translate that, and then how I can help them hit what they're trying to do.
Okay, great. Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot. Should marketers be paid base plus commission?
I am.
Yeah, I mean, I hear more and more that people are saying, it should be revenue, not just a goal, but, if it's a goal, then you should be compensated based on that.
I think that's the first time I ever realized that I was in marketing now is when I saw something that I did actually translate into sales dollars. Because coming from a PR and social media background, especially early on, I was like, I'm doing awareness, and that was fine. Or I'm getting something in the paper or the indie. So when I figured out that I could send an email out and convert that all the way through and actually say this email made $4,000 from selling records or whatever, that's when I was like, this is actually pretty cool because I can actually prove my worth in a way that everyone understands, not just like shares and estimated reach and that kind of thing. So that was exciting for me, but it's also, it's interesting. My husband's in sales, and to me, I can never do sales, but I think that's what we're doing at the end of the day.
I think the challenge is when other departments or other individuals are compensated in a model that doesn't align. So it doesn't necessarily matter so much that marketing is compensated by base and compensation. It's does that compensation cause motives that are counter to what other departments are doing, so the typical sales and marketing conflict. And I think my personal opinion, coming from an original company that was marketing revenue generation, was that it was my job to take all the easy stuff off the plate. Like if someone just needed a coupon code, I could send them that in mass and in scale way more effectively than any salesperson could. But the people that needed a little bit more pushing, they needed that personal touch, I could share with sales, and collectively we should be working to get that total number to a point and a goal. So I don't know that, I think something like base plus commission is talking tactic, and I think we're creating tactics that are conflicting. So I think it's more about how do you align everyone's compensation in a way that helps us get to that end group goal.
Great. Okay, so let's see, any other questions that we can take? Doing okay? What timing, Chris? What's that? Okay. So yeah, I guess just one last question. Love to hear your thoughts on is, when we think about career paths for a marketer, is it CMO or bust, or can you typically see a lot of VP sales, you see a lot of CFOs becoming CEO. Can CMOs or can a marketer become a CEO?
Yes.
How? Like what's
A CMO, a marketer should be CEO. Because a marketer is customer centric by definition. And a marketer has to justify every dollar with every department. And what better way to lead and promote the mission of a company than someone who who understands marketing. That being said, a marketer based on 90s marketers, 80s marketers doesn't fly anymore. You have to be an analyst, you need to be a technologist, and you need to be a marketer. But I believe CMOs are going to be CEOs I'm hoping for that. That CMOs become CEOs in this next generation because it makes sense. So I say yes.
Great.
Yeah, and marketers have to touch everything. I think that's what sets my department apart in my current organization is that we literally have to know about everything all the time because especially in a digital age and social media where something can pop up from any angle, I think that I would love to work under, a CMO or be that person that moves into that role because I just feel like it would be such a great way to, think about the visitor in all the different departments that we have at a museum or wherever you're at. That would be, I can just imagine having the CEO who's a marketer. That would be so exciting from my perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think one thing that jumps out at me is understanding the value of the brand, which is not something that a lot of other departments care about, and understanding all of the points of the products and the entire portfolio of products. I think we're one of the few departments that really do understand every single product, whether it's a winner or not, and have tried at least at some point to try to get that to go. But I think it is a possibility. I think we have to change our language. I think we have to change the terminology that we're using, the conversations that we're having, how we're justifying our decisions, and how we're showing those results. That's why I think CFOs come. They understand the balance sheet. They understand cash flow. We have to get better as a profession in talking about those things and how the things we do affect that. Versus inheriting budgets and then doing the best we can with what we're given.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, terrific. Yeah.
Just to follow up on what JT said, any of you, can you think of a good reason why we're not deep into this cross-functional branding, marketing, design, development, and any other applicable cross-functional talent? Why aren't we working together as a team internally more so than we are? And we're still in silos primarily. There's the design firm over here that you contract, and you've got your PR firm, and you've got your branding folks, kind of in an agile way. Mm-hmm. How is it that it's not moving quicker? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, the reason is that CMOs aren't CEOs, and the reason why that is because, in our strategy practice, we consult a lot with C-suite within organizations who frankly can't get out of their own way, and it comes down to one simple thing, and I'm sure those of you who work especially in bigger companies know what that is, and that is bonuses. What are people bonused on? They're not bonused on everyone working together. They're bonused on all the way up to the C-suite person in your department. What does that person want to do? Not how do you work together, right? And that is a big, big issue in getting anything done collaboratively, specifically on the technology and marketing side. Because what do marketers need to do? They need technology. What does technology want? They don't want marketing campaigns messing up with product, right? They're being bonused on uptime, not innovation, right? As one example. So I believe that the biggest issue is how people are being bonused, and it trickles all the way down and it creates a culture where you're going to do just enough because you think that's what you're expected to do, but you're not going to innovate as a team because you're not incentivized to. I believe that tipping point is already happening, but it's happening with the disruptors of the industry. It's happening with digitally native startups because those people don't have any of the extra baggage of 30, 50-year-old companies.
Yeah, I think an interesting trend is to think about how we hear right now more about design and its ability to influence decisions throughout a business, more so than we hear about marketing. You think about things like design thinking and the application of design principles to not only design of things, but designs of business models. And that ability, I think, in new companies is a lot easier, right? You don't have to pull out things, and you're starting from a clean canvas, a blank canvas. So that ability to kind of think through design, I think, is doing us a good service. But I think as marketers, we have to embrace that language and understand not just design, but also understand how that design applies to business. And I think those things will naturally come together. I think, as Greg kind of alluded to, I think we're already there in the tipping point. It's going to take some time, but it is in those organizations that got to start clean.
We're trying to do that at the museum. We're doing things like, instead of having a head of IT, we're looking for a director of technology. Instead of having head of education, we're looking for director of programming and audience engagement. So even just being really intentional with, words and vocabulary and titles, and then hiring people with a mindset that it's going to be collaborative, because, like you said, technology informs marketing, which audience research informs marketing. It's all working together. So we're trying to be really intentional with and I like the sort of getting rid of the baggage analogy, and this is how we've always done it, this is how museums have always operated. Just had a great conversation this morning about thinking about, instead of having a year-long membership, let's do something like a subscriber model, like Spotify and Netflix and Amazon Prime. How can we utilize these pieces of the puzzle and look at things that we're using, and like Greg said, we're trying out and figuring out how that could apply for something as specific as museum membership. So yeah, just all these new conversations, being a part of them too is really important.
All right, terrific. Thank you. Well, I really enjoyed this chance to talk with everyone here.